The World Economic Forum continues, and it appears like they're plotting a cyber attack to take out the internet because, as you know, there's a lot of people saying bad things about Klaus Schwab out there on the internet, and he doesn't want to hear it. This was an interesting exchange between this independent journalist called Masako Ganaha at Ganaha_Masako on Twitter. And she says, I encountered Klaus Schwab. And here's what happens. He's afraid of our resistance. So ultra shout out to Masako Gahana on Twitter. She approached this little Dr. Evil, and here's what the conversation sounded like.
Chairman Schwab, I'm from Japan. May I ask you for... I'm from Japan.
Yeah.
And may I ask you for a comment?
No,
we're on our way to the next thing. We're a bit
no
late.
No comments.
Oh, I can just walk with you and then ask
questions. I think we're gonna rush actually. But thank you. Thanks very much.
Which media are you with?
I am an independent journalist from Japan.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Did you see that? That's very interesting. So Schwab is walking away. The initial comment, he has a little hard time hearing, so you get real close in that earlobe. If you wanted to know what Klaus Schwab's inner ear looked like, you're welcome, America and global world. There it is. So he comes up and gets asked a question. Would you like to take a comment? And he says no. But you'll notice he walks away and turns around. He says, you know what? Maybe I'm feeling a little saucy today. I actually would love to give a comment. What media center are you from? Because he knows he owns most of them. And that if he owns one of them, it's one of his favorite media companies. Maybe he can just say whatever he wants. And it'll turn out great. And it'll look like a great clip. I gave a great segment when I was walking down the street to some little person who just appeared. Turns around, realizes, oh, it's an independent journalist. Oh, they don't like that. They're going to report the truth. He doesn't own them. So he just walks back away.
A comment?
No,
we're on our way to the next thing. We're a bit late.
I can just walk with you and then ask questions.
I think we're gonna rush actually. But thank you. Thanks very much.
Which media are you with?
I am an independent journalist from Japan.
No, thank you very much.
Nope.
I have to ask.
Get out.
Thanks.
Get out. Run, Klaus. Run. Run away.
But I wanted to ask
just a quick question, Klaus. Just a quick question, just one.
I can just walk and ask you.
Yeah, we're not.
Thank you. No, sorry, we're in a big rush. We've got so many things tonight.
So busy, yeah.
Thank you.
It's very precious moment.
I know. He's got so many people stopping that if he were to stop for everything, we win. That's the unfortunate. So I'm very sorry, but thank you. Thank you for trying.
Do you know the voice that worry about globalism?
Thank you.
There are many concerns.
Nice evening. Thank you. Thank you.
Nice evening in Davos. Bye, Klaus. Yeah, merge appropriately. Drive safely, everybody. The ice is slippery out there. Make it home safe. Are those gas guzzlers? What kind of car was this? Oh, that looks like an Audi, no? Oh, did they... Are those exhaust? Oh, I think we see some exhaust on that one, huh? I'm not a car connoisseur. But I don't think that's a Tesla. Shout out to independent journos, especially Masako Ganaha out there in Davos, bringing questions out to Klaus Schwab. Now, these individuals are out having interesting conversations with themselves. One of the things that they're planning for is a cyber attack, because we know they're planning for everything else, like the meltdown of the ice caps and the end of the climate and endless pandemics and all the other things. They're also evidently plotting for a cyber attack, or planning for one, preparing for one. We'll see how that looks.
We're here today to share the findings of the World Economic Forum's Global Security Outlook Report 2023. This is a result of research in collaboration with the forum's communities and our partner Accenture, in which we've interviewed and sought input from over 300 executives globally. The most striking finding that we found is that 93% of cyber leaders and 86% of cyber business leaders believe that the geopolitical instability makes a catastrophic cyber event likely in the next 2 years.
Next few years, likely. Almost like they would love for that to happen, because we know that there are situations where there are problematic things that are being bandied about on the internet that the World Economic Forum just does not like at all. And they don't want those debates to take place. And so if there is a big cyber attack, if there's a big meltdown, gosh, it's probably because there's a bunch of dangerous people on the internet. And what do you do if there's a bunch of dangerous people on the internet doing dangerous things? Well, you got to keep them off the internet, huh? So that they can't spread misinformation and spread dangerous memes that are illegal, or debate very, very important ideas that might undermine their profits. This is the CEO of Moderna, Stefan Bancel, who was there at the World Economic Forum, and he was talking about the problems of countries debating healthcare policy.
The extent of this misinformation when it comes to vaccination, I think has, as somebody who works in the media, I mean, that was just overwhelming to see all of that across all the channels, right?
Yes, and I exactly agree with panelists, which is, I think, in some countries, you saw scientific debate in national TV at prime time. So you can imagine how people were scared. Ben has said, a lot of political debate in some countries, and the US was kind of maybe one of the worst places in the world. And you saw the differences of countries where all the parties would say, this has been approved by the regulators, clinical studies have been done, you should get your vaccines and so on. And then, as Seth said, the social media was just terrible.
Terrible.
Just terrible.
Yeah,
and
people were talking.
At the time of uncertainty where people were scared for their loved ones, many people, locked downs. It was very hard for everybody from a just mental health standpoint. When you couple this with all that environment, you could see some countries where you had scientific debate and political debate and social media. If you had those three things, the vaccine rate very, very low.
Very
Absolutely.
low, very low, because people were on the internet talking about the internet. So you can imagine that a cyber attack would be very useful to have to, to force societies to shore up the internet so that there are no dangerous ideas that are being spread all over the place. Speaking of dangerous ideas, we have this fella, Brian Stelter, who vomits them out of his mouth very regularly. For some reason, they invited the potato over to the World Economic Forum, and they had him mediate a panel on misinformation and disinformation, given that he was formerly one of the biggest spreaders of misinformation and disinformation when he used to run a show that nobody watched on CNN.
Well, we need the people who understand the language and the case law in the country, because what qualifies as hate speech, as illegal hate speech,
what?
Which you will have soon also in the US. I think that
what?
We have a strong reason why.
Did you see what that lady just said? Illegal hate speech, which I expect you will have soon in the United States. And she looks over at this guy who just laughs at her.
We need the people who understand the language and the case law in the country, because what qualifies as hate speech, as illegal hate speech, which you will have soon also in the US.
In America.
I think that
coming to you guys soon.
We have a strong reason why we have this in the criminal law. We need the platforms to simply work with the language and to identify such cases. The AI would be too dangerous.
We have to eliminate the speech because it's too problematic for them to hear. Now we're going to hear more from Chrystia Freeland. We've got the whole segment on Ukraine because they want more money for them and more for an endless war. Before we turn over to the UN, climate change, and then we'll wrap it up with Kirsten Sinema, who is in a very interesting outfit. We'll listen to her. But let's first talk about our friends over at Goldco, because of course, if the World Economic Forum takes out the internet, well, you're not going to be able to access your bank account, which is why it's always good to think about gold. And my friends, you know, things are scary out there. If you've got a retirement account, savings, IRA, 401k, you know as well as I do that the Biden administration has printed more money in the past 2 years than the previous 100 years combined. The national debt over $30 trillion, and inflation is the highest we've seen since 1982, and it's not slowing down. It's only a matter of time until the house of cards comes crashing down. If you have retirement savings, your money could be at serious risk. Talk to my friends. They're at Goldco. See how you can protect your retirement with gold and silver before it's too late. Go to robertlikesgold.com. They will give you $10,000 and more or in free silver when you open up a qualifying account over at robertlikesgold.com. My friends at Goldco are an A+ rated business with the Better Business Bureau, sponsors of the show, and it's a good rule to always buy gold. ABG. Always buy gold at robertlikesgold.com. All right, my friends. And so now let's turn our attention over to Canada. You remember Chrystia Freeland, the Canadian finance minister who wrecked Canadian democracy with that little dictator, Justin Trudeau, up there. She was at the World Economic Forum because it's a perfect place for her. And she was talking about Ukraine and how the endless money and resources that are being dumped into that black hole are for our own good. And we're all going to be better for it.
President Duda quite rightly pointed out that this is a fight ultimately about values, and it is. But I think we in the West also need to understand that victory that President Zelensky spoke about and that time which he said we need to use. It's not about doing Ukraine favors that we're talking about. Supplying Ukraine with weapons, and as President Zelensky very crucially pointed out, supplying Ukraine with the money it needs to win the war is ultimately in our own self-interest.
Ultimately in their own self-interest. So if we all give a bunch of money and resources endlessly, then it all will work out. Chrystia Freeland, Canadian finance minister at the World Economic Forum. We also have Secretary General from NATO. His name is Jens Stoltenberg. And so they are also talking about how much money needs to go over there.
It is extremely important that President Putin doesn't win this war, partly because it will be a tragedy for the Ukrainians, but it will be very dangerous for all of us. Because then the message to authoritarian leaders, not only to Putin, but also other authoritarian leaders, is that when they use brutal force, when they violate international law, they achieve what they want. And that will be a very bad and dangerous lesson. It will make the world more dangerous and us more vulnerable. And that's the reason why, if we want a negotiated peaceful solution to the war in Ukraine, we need to provide military support to Ukraine. That's the only way. Weapons, they are the way to peace.
Weapons are the way to peace. So, okay, now, last clip is from Kissinger. Okay, Kissinger is one of these guys who's been a foreign policy individual for, I don't know, 100-something years. He looks like it too. This is a very painful clip. We'll listen to some of it. But he's basically at this point swapping sides. He was originally an individual who said Ukraine shouldn't join NATO because if they do, that might mean that we enter into global nuclear war because Russia has basically said that is a fail-safe line for them, a red line in the sand. And he's saying, I originally agreed with that position, that I wasn't going to be demanding Ukraine join NATO, but apparently that flipped. Now Ukraine should be a part of NATO, and we all should brace for impact, I guess.
The United States has supported Ukrainian resistance should continue to support and, if necessary, intensify its military support until this ceasefire line is either reached or accepted in some preliminary discussions. Before this war, I was opposed to membership of Ukraine in NATO because I feared
nuclear war.
That it would start exactly the process that we are seeing now.
Nuclear war. We'd all die.
Now that this process has reached this level, the idea of a neutral Ukraine under these conditions is no longer meaningful. And at the end of the process that I described, it ought to be guaranteed by NATO in whatever forms NATO can develop. But I believe Ukrainian membership in NATO would be an appropriate outcome.
There you go. So Ukraine should join NATO. Then I think that actually launches World War III. All right. So that's what they're talking about over there in Davos. They also have the UN Secretary General who's going to come out and scream at us all about eating too much meat and using too much energy, even though they all fly into one of the most beautiful, insane places in the world to evidently engage in long-term, work with individuals who also fly in there, and they charge $2,300 a night. If you know what I mean, we covered that story yesterday.
Politicians need to understand, and sometimes we are faced with this kind of challenges. It is better to take today decisions that will eventually be not popular, but it will be essential to be able to shape the public opinion itself. But politicians
do certain things to shape the outcomes. The politicians have to do hard things. It doesn't matter if the people like it or not, because it's for their own good. The people are too stupid, and everybody here at the World Economic Forum knows better.
We learned last week that certain fossil fuel producers were fully aware in the 70s that their core product was baking our planet.
Baking our planet.
And just like the tobacco industry, they rode roughshod over their own science. Some in big oil peddled the big lie.
Oh, they're using that line now,
too?
And
like the tobacco industry, those responsible must be held to account.
So they're going to go after the car manufacturers now and the oil companies. Great. This guy, don't know who he was. I clipped this because it's strange. He's listening to his 24-year-old daughter, and he stopped eating meat, and he sort of started to look like it, too.
It's a very important point that you are addressing. My daughter, 24,
brilliant, probably
inspired me.
Oh, that's
and
great.
Said that, how can you advocate for these zero-carbon value chains if you still eat meat?
How can you do that, you monster?
And so I stopped eating
dad?
meat. Now the math would say, well, you need to stop eating meat 11 years to compensate for a flight to Thailand.
Or to Davos.
Yes. But if
or
a billion
Davos.
people stop eating meat, I tell you it has a big impact.
Stop eating meat.
Not only does it have a big impact on the current food system, but it will also inspire innovation of food systems. And I predict that we will have proteins not coming from meat in the future.
Yeah, bugs. They'll come from bugs.
They will probably taste
and
even
labs.
better. So why are we trying to mimic meat if we can have a better taste? They will be zero carbon and much healthier than the kind of food that we eat today. That is a mission that we need to get on. I can inspire you to maybe look at an organization called EAT, easy to remember, EAT, who have all the facts on this and who have the policies necessary, the innovations necessary, and the scale necessary in order to make food systems sustainable and healthy.
Thank you so much, Jim. And you're
all right. So he's going to eat the bugs. He's going to make us all the rest of us eat the bugs. It's going to taste great, evidently. And his 24-year-old daughter has caused him to stop eating meat. What an inspirational story. She's probably highly educated too. And we'll learn more about the intelligentsia in a minute. But Sinema was also there. She's an Arizona senator who allegedly is independent now. We'll see. She flew all the way from Arizona over to Davos. Let's listen to see what she had to say.
Senator Sinema, and then I go to Senator Cruz. Since last time we met, you become an independent.
That's correct.
Happened that same day or the day after, didn't it?
So, as folks know, I have formally declared my independence from what I consider to be a deeply broken two-party system. Those who know me know that I was always an independent voice and always have been for the things that I believe in and for my state and for my country. But I do think it's important to note that what you've heard about partisanship, I believe, is accurate. You know, in the last 2 years, if we think, you know, January 6th, which is a horrible day from 2 years ago, created, I think, concern and fear for every patriotic American across the country.
No, not
But
really.
in the resulting 2 years, the Democratic Party shared a narrative that said we would not have any more free and fair elections in this country if the United States Congress didn't eliminate the filibuster and pass a massive voting rights package. As we all know, the filibuster was not eliminated. Joe and I were not interested in sacrificing that important guardrail for the institution. That massive voting rights bill was not passed through Congress. And then we had a free and fair election all across the country. And as has been noted, the outcome of that election was different than many people expected. Most election deniers lost across the country, and individuals of both political parties, some extreme.
Yeah, we'll just leave that there. But based on what we've seen in the Twitter files, based on what we've seen from big tech, based on what we've seen from all of the different facets, she calls that a free and fair election?
Some moderate, won. So we had a free and fair election.
Okay.
So one could posit that the push by one political party to eliminate an important guardrail in an institution in our country may have been premature or overreaching in order to get the short-term victories they wanted. Then we fast forward to where we are today, and we saw the House of Representatives struggle for multiple days in a row as Kevin McCarthy, dear friend of mine, had to continue conceding point after point after point to the radical right of the GOP. To a point where he's now in an unenviable position that will make it very difficult for us to meet our obligation when the debt limit fight comes up later this year.
Good, stop spending.
Those are just two examples of the pull that you see political parties giving in order to get everything they want, rather than to recognize that the heart of a democracy is not just collaboration and working together. It is compromise. It is getting a lot done, but not everything you want done. And so I think that there's actually a really big opportunity right now for our country to have a reckoning of sorts and to see that perhaps these pulls that are happening in the parties, as Mikey mentioned, neither speaker has ever shown interest in recent years of collaborating with the moderates and other parties because...
Has she said anything in this clip that would bring conservatives to her side? She called J6 a bunch of extremists, and she said that there were a bunch of free and fair elections all over the country. She's from Arizona. Hello? Arizona. She's an Arizona senator. Was she here over the last election? Holy crap, it was one of the worst run elections ever in the history of this country. By their own admission, he said it was chaotic on election day. It was a free and fair election. She's our senator sitting here. And she's going to say that now it's about compromise and joining hands and singing Kumbaya with each other? Give me a stinking break. She's here ripping on the conservatives this whole time, the far-right radicals. Rip on the left. Let's see you really be independent. Rip on the psychopaths in your own party that has caused you to evidently leave. They do this all the time. The Republicans always have to compromise. The left never has to.
They go a my way or the highway did. Pelosi did it. McCarthy's doing it. This is not healthy for democracy. So I think that this is an opportunity for us
we should run elections like we did last time.
To look back and say, is this partisanship serving us? I would posit to you that it's not. And so while some would say...
Your party started all of this with the raid on Trump's house, with the January 6th committee. It's been one thing after the other.
There were reluctant folks working in Congress in the last 2 years. I would actually say that that was the basis for the productivity for some incredible achievements that made a difference for the American people in the last 2 years.
And we still don't agree on getting rid of the filibuster.
That's correct.
Thank you. I was thinking about Congresswoman Cheryl.
High five between Manchin and...
We still don't agree on getting rid of the filibuster.
That's correct.
Right there.
Thank you. I was thinking about Congresswoman Cheryl.
All right, so we had Congress people over there. Also, this woman was there. Her name is Maria Salazar, and she was talking about our illegal immigration problem.
Overhaul of the immigration system. Because not only we need those hands, like the Congress, like a senator was saying, but we need to also give dignity to those people who are in the country. And those are the people that I represent. We're talking about 13, 15 million people who are, most of them Hispanics, I would say 85%, who speak my language.
Did she say 50 million?
Who are, most of them Hispanics. Those are the people that I represent. We're talking about 13, 15 million people.
13, 15.
Who are, most of them Hispanics, I would say 85%.
Probably
who
closer
speak
to
my
50.
language, look like me, and sound like me, that are contributing with the economy of this country, and they live in the shadows. So it's time to seal the border, like she said, put order, let's see who comes in and who doesn't, and then turn around and give dignity. That doesn't mean path to citizenship. That means to include them and make them dignified members of our community.
Thank you.
All right, I wonder if the World Economic Forum is going to agree with her on sealing off the border. Think that's going to happen? I certainly don't. Now, there was something I wanted to share with you guys. It's from a book called it's called Skin in the Game by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. And let me grab this. I have it here on my phone, but I wanted to show you the thumbnail or the title of the book while I read a little bit from it. This is the name of the book. It's called Skin in the Game. It's by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. And I think it's very appropriate to what's going on in the World Economic Forum. He talks about this concept called the intellectual yet idiot. You see this here. This is from the book, and the title is called Intellectual Yet Idiot. And he writes for us here. He says, what we saw worldwide from 2014 to 2018, from India, the UK, the US, was a rebellion against the inner circle of no skin in the game policy-making clerks and journalist insiders, that class of paternalistic semi-intellectual experts with some Ivy League, Oxford, Cambridge, or similar label-driven education who are telling the rest of us, 1, what to do, 2, what to eat, 3, how to speak, 4, how to think, and 5, whom to vote for, which is exactly what's happening in the World Economic Forum. He writes, where to find a coconut. He says, but the problem is the one-eyed following the blind. These self-described members of the intelligentsia, can't find a coconut on Coconut Island, meaning they aren't intelligent enough to define intelligence, hence they fall into circularities. Their main skill is a capacity to pass exams written by people like them, or to write papers read by people like them, right? These people are, in other words, they're creating these events for themselves. They go around and they just puff each other up at these things one after another. And they think they're all geniuses. Some of us have been blind to their serial incompetence, he says. With psychology studies replicating less than 40% of the time, dietary advice reversing after 30 years of dietary fat phobia, macroeconomics and financial economics are scientifically worse than astrology, and we have the clueless individuals appointed like Ben Bernanke. He calls the intellectual yet idiot, the IYI. He says this is a product of modernity. It's been proliferating since at least the mid-20th century to reach a local supremum today, to the point that we have experienced a takeover by people without skin in the game, guys like at the World Economic Forum. In most countries, the government's role is between 5 and 10 times what it was a century ago, expressed in a percentage of gross domestic product. The intellectual yet idiot seems ubiquitous in our lives, but is still a small minority and is rarely seen outside specialized outlets, think tanks like the World Economic Forum, the media, and university social science departments. Most people have proper jobs and there are not many openings for the intellectual yet idiots, which explains how they can be so influential in spite of their low numbers. The intellectual yet idiot pathologizes others for doing things he doesn't understand without ever realizing it is his understanding that may be limited. He thinks people should act according to their best interests, and he knows their interests, particularly if they're, quote, rednecks, or if they're from English non-crisp vowel class who voted for Brexit. When plebeians do something that makes sense to themselves, but not to him, the intellectual yet idiot uses the term uneducated. What we generally call participation in the political process, he calls the two distinct designations, quote, democracy, when it fits with the intellectual yet idiot, and populism, when the plebeians dare to vote in a way that contradicts the idiot yet intellectual preferences. While rich people believe in one tax dollar, one vote, more humanistic ones in one man, one vote, Monsanto in one lobbyist, one vote, the intellectual yet idiot believes in one Ivy League degree, one vote, with some equivalents for foreign elite schools and PhDs, as these are needed in the club. They are what Nietzsche calls Bildungsphilisters, educated Philistines. He writes, beware of the slightly erudite, who think he is an erudite, as well as the barber who decides to perform brain surgery. The intellectual yet idiot is everywhere. We see a lot of them out there, right? That is essentially what the World Economic Forum is. It's a bunch of intellectuals, so-called, with degrees in different cabinets, a bunch of finance idiots, whatever, and they all are plotting for the rest of us because they know better for us. But the problem is they don't really know anything, right? They're all just sort of indulging themselves. We'll see how their policies continue to spread throughout the world. We will, of course, continue to cover it. Thank you for joining us as we do. Thank you for hitting that like button and subscribing, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.